One of the things I think as Americans we're all partial to are the individual do-it-yourself stories. The superhero who can do it all, right? We love the story of Superman and Batman and these other superheroes that we have, that they take on the world, right? And come out unfazed. We really like that. We also like the underdog winning. We like to root for the underdog, right? That's why you have in March Madness time, of college basketball, you have so many people placing bets on the underdog. They want to see that Cinderella story come through and win it all, right? Rarely happens, but that's what people want to see. They want to see the mighty Alabama taken down. We all, minus one, want to see mighty Alabama taken down. We like that underdog story. We like it when there's a single person defeating overwhelming odds against them. Just look at the movies and TV shows and books and other media that portray this message in our culture. The Bible has several of those kinds of stories as well. From Abraham, right, to Deborah, one of the judges in the Old Testament. From Moses to Jeremiah. The Bible is full of these sorts of scenarios and stories. Paul references one of these at the beginning of chapter 11, which we're going to read here in just a moment. He references the story of Elijah, and you probably remember this story quite well. And he doesn't go into all the details. He's assuming that the people who are reading his letter know the scriptures. That story of Elijah is one where he confronts the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. Right? And there's this showdown between these hundreds of prophets who worship this false god, these Israelites who are supposed to be devoting their lives to Yahweh. And instead, Elijah stands alone on this mountain. Right? And of course, we know the end of the story, that God wins, right? That's the ending of all the stories in the Bible. God wins. But then there's an after story after God wins. You'd expect Elijah to be thrilled at this, right? You would expect him to have overwhelming joy that God has shown up in this miraculous and powerful way. And instead, he cowers like a little child. He runs out into the wilderness and says, "Just let me die. God, why have you done this to me? I am the only one who worships you anymore." But in fact, that's not true. God sets him straight on that account. So let's read what Paul has to say about Elijah and how he connects himself, I think, with Elijah. Paul says this in Romans chapter 11, beginning in verse 1. "I ask then, has God rejected his own people, the nation of Israel? Of course not. I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham and a member of the tribe of Benjamin. No, God has not rejected his own people, whom he chose from the very beginning. Realize what the scriptures say about this. Elijah the prophet complained to God about the people of Israel and said, 'Lord, they have killed your prophets and torn down your altars. I'm the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too.' Do you remember God's reply? He said, 'No, I have 7,000 others who have never bowed down to Baal.' It is the same today. For a few of the people of Israel have remained faithful because of God's grace, his undeserved kindness in choosing them. And since it is through God's kindness, then it is not by their good works. For in that case, God's grace would not be what it really is, free and undeserved. So this is the situation. Most of the people of Israel have not found the favor of God they are looking for so earnestly. A few have, the ones God has chosen. The hearts of the rest were hardened. As the scriptures say, God has put them into a deep sleep. To this day he has shut their eyes so they do not see, and closed their ears so they do not hear. Likewise, David said, 'Let their bountiful table become a snare, a trap that makes them think all is well. Let their blessings cause them to stumble, and let them get what they deserve. Let their eyes go blind so they cannot see, and let their backs be bent forever.'" Jump down to verse 16, if you will. "Just as the entire batch of dough is holy because the portion given as an offering is holy, so if the roots of the tree are holy, the branches will be too. But some of these branches from Abraham's tree, some of the people of Israel, have been broken off. And you Gentiles who were branches from a wild olive tree have been grafted in. So now you also receive the blessing God has promised Abraham and his children, sharing in the rich nourishment from the root of God's special olive tree. You must not brag about being grafted in to replace the branches that were broken off. You are just a branch, not the root. Well, you may say, those branches were broken off to make room for me. Yes, but remember, those branches were broken off because they didn't believe in Christ. And you are there because you do believe. Don't think highly of yourself, but fear what could happen. For if God did not spare the original branches, he won't spare you either. Notice how God is both kind and severe. He is severe toward those who disobey, but kind to you if you continue to trust in his kindness. But if you stop trusting, you also will be cut off. And if the people of Israel turn from their unbelief, they will be grafted in again, for God has the power to graft them back into the tree. You, by nature, were a branch cut off from a wild olive tree. So if God was willing to do something contrary to nature by grafting you into his cultivated tree, he will be far more eager to graft the original branches back into the tree where they belong. I want you to understand this mystery, dear brothers and sisters, so that you will not feel proud about yourselves. Some of the people of Israel have hard hearts, but this will last only until the full number of Gentiles comes to Christ. So all Israel will be saved. As the scriptures say, the one who rescues will come from Jerusalem. He will turn Israel away from ungodliness. And this is the covenant with them, that I will take away their sins. Many of the people of Israel are now enemies of the good news, and this benefits you Gentiles. Yet they are still the people he loves because he chose their ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For God's gifts and his call can never be withdrawn. Once you Gentiles were rebels against him. God was merciful to you instead. Now they are the rebels, and God's mercy has come to you so that they too will share in God's mercy. For God has imprisoned everyone in disobedience so he can have mercy on everyone. I want to start by talking about Paul and this idea of the remnant that he brings up here in chapter 11. Remember, a few weeks ago, I talked about how 9, 10, and 11 are a bit of a, what's the right word? They're their own kind of subset of chapters within Romans. They fit what he's talking about in Romans. But he's definitely in 9, 10, and 11 crafting this argument specifically about the Jews. What do we do? How does Paul think about his own people, the Israelites? And remember, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about Paul on this journey. And he has read the signs all along, the same way that if we're walking or driving along a road, we read the road signs, right? Or at least you should. If you're not, start reading the road signs as you drive, okay? We got to read the road signs. That's what Paul was doing as he was walking on this journey, this spiritual journey. Paul sees that the road signs are pointing right in the fork of the road. The Israelites are seeing that they should go left. And now Paul is confused. What has happened? That's what Paul's asking. What has happened? Have I completely misread the signs? And he thinks, no, I haven't. I've read them properly. Why are all of them going the opposite direction I am? That's what Paul's facing here in 9, 10, and 11. And 11 is kind of his final, what do we do with the Jews moment. And so I think Paul is envisioning himself in a similar situation that Elijah found himself in so many years before. Paul has worked hard, he's prayed hard, and no doubt sweated and wept hard on behalf of his people. He's a beacon of hope, sending out the good news message about the Messiah to fulfill the covenant promise. Now this message has gone to the Gentiles as well. So Paul, like Elijah, has been victorious against the powers that might suppress God's message, right? That might try to keep it from going out. Paul didn't do it with fire and sword like Elijah. He did it with love and truth. And Paul has looked out at his own people and he's seen their disobedience. He's witnessed their rejection of the promise which God made to them in the time of Abraham. and that message, that promise would extend to the whole world. This has left him bewildered and quite worried, I think. Like those modern stories that we hear of, people who give their lives to Christ and in doing so forsake family, forsake ancestry, and put themselves at risk and in danger in their situations, Paul feels forsaken by his people. He's in danger from them. This isn't just a theological point for him to argue like it is for us. It's a deeply personal issue that he has to wrestle with. Paul is worried about his family, as I think any of us would be. If some kind of situation would happen in our family, we would be worried about that. The Israelites are Paul's family, and he sees them choosing the wrong path. He sees them misreading the signs, and again he wonders why. So Paul sets about answering the inevitable question of this whole letter. Has God completely discarded the Jewish people from himself and switched tracks to the Gentiles instead of the Jews? There were a lot of Jewish groups in the first century. I think sometimes we like to think about, what did the Jews think about God in the first century? Well, that's an impossible question to answer. Because just as there are literally dozens, probably hundreds of denominations of Christianity, right? Different versions. You can just drive down Clapboard Ridge, and you're going to pass by. Most of us drive up this way on Clapboard Ridge. We pass by how many churches? 4, 5? There's another one down the road, right? There's another one off. Churches are all over the place, right? We all have slightly different ways of understanding the scriptures and thinking about them and understanding Jesus. Same is true of the Jews in the first century. It's unfortunate that we kind of think back on them as though they all thought the same way. So Paul is when he's making these arguments, he is arguing against all of these different groups together. So many of the Jewish groups in the first century believed themselves to be the true remnant that were spoken about in the Old Testament. Paul's already been quoting those passages he did in chapter 10. You can go back and read those if you desire. One of the most prominent Jewish groups that we know of at the time was the group that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. We've all heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? They're most often called the Essenes, the Essene community. They believed themselves, we have their text. They said, we are the remnant that was promised. What does Paul say? No. We are the remnant that was promised. So you have these different groups trying to understand their scriptures and figure out what God was meaning and doing. Of course, I agree with Paul, but he's working within that context of all these groups who are making these arguments. And Paul also picks up on this theme and believes something else is being worked out. That Paul himself is one of that remnant, along with those other Jews who have seen the truth that Jesus is the Messiah. Paul may feel like Elijah at times. He's facing a role all alone, right? I think that's how he feels. But he knows that God has called and preserved a remnant that will remain true. But this remnant is different than how the other Jews thought about the remnant at that time. They are a remnant because they kept the law in a particular way. That's what the Essenes said. Keep the law the way that we want you to keep the law, and you will be part of the remnant that God promised. Paul says you're a remnant. You're part of the remnant because you believe and have faith in Jesus the Messiah and the grace that God offered through him. So, once again, if we want to understand God's righteousness, we simply need to look at God's grace and understand that we've been given a gift, a free gift, an undeserved gift with absolutely no strings attached. You know, we get a lot of junk mail, we get a lot of junk calls these days, right? And the thing that we all know about that junk mail and those junk calls is there's a string attached to it. You may say you want to give me thousands of dollars miraculously, and we would all want that. But there's always a catch. Right? There's always a string attached. And we're waiting for but you also must, and whatever that thing is. That's not how God operates. God isn't a telemarketer. God isn't Publishers Clearinghouse sending you something in the mail. He's just not. That is not how God works. His grace isn't defined by what you do, but by what He has already done on the cross and in the resurrection for you. That's grace. That's the undeserved free gift with no strings attached that's offered to you if you accept it. We make up the strings attached side of it. We're not given a place among the remnant because of works. If that were true, then grace would cease to be grace. So we come to the metaphor of the olive tree. It's a really interesting part of this chapter. Paul uses this metaphor, and this kind of metaphor was used a lot in the ancient world, not just in Scripture. The idea that a plant can be transplanted or grafted in. I mean, we see Jesus using agricultural metaphors all the time in his teachings, right? To an agrarian society, that makes sense. It doesn't make as much sense to us. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I understand what it means to graft one tree onto another. Right? Like, I could read some scientific explanation of it. That doesn't mean I really get it. Because I've never done it before. Right? I don't truly understand it. But Paul's using it. And the mechanics of how it works aren't as important to his end point about it all anyway. Paul understands that some Jews, like himself, believe in the Messiah and are the promised remnant from the Israelites prophesied about so long ago. But then he's asking the question, can any more Jews be saved, or is God only focusing on the Gentiles now? And so what does he say to that point? He actually gives two different ideas. In verse 16, he gives a really short one. He talks about the first fruits. So here you have to draw upon your Old Testament knowledge, which, surprise, surprise, Paul is doing, because that's his scripture. And what were the first fruits? Well, again, talking about an agrarian society, when you harvest crops, right? When you bring all of your crops in, or when you raise cattle and other livestock, the first 10% of that was to be dedicated immediately to God. That was a way of showing God, you are the provider of everything that I have. I'm going to give some back to you. So they would do that. But in doing so, Paul is saying that everything that you've collected is also holy, is also sacred. There's some kind of transference that's going on. In presenting 10%, you're saying this is holy and dedicated to you, God. It's sanctified and sacred before you. And God's saying, in return, everything else that you have is also sacred and holy. That's what Paul's saying. I think what he means by that, then, is that the remnant of Israelites, in some way, are making the rest of Israel holy and sanctified. It's a really interesting argument that he's making. And then he goes into this metaphor of the olive trees. And this whole, again, grafting into branches. Paul stresses that this message to the Gentile Christians is one of stop bragging. So apparently he's received word, that would be my guess, he's received communication that the Gentiles are bragging over the Jews, the Jewish Christians there, hey, we are more special than you are because God has rejected you and welcomed us. So what does Paul do? He reminds them that they've been brought in under a miracle of grace. So they have no right to boast over the original branch that was taken out so that they can be grafted in, because it literally has nothing to do with them being special. And if they continue in this train of thought, then they're going to end up in the exact same place that the Jews ended up to begin with. That was their big flaw all along. God's called us special, so we're special. And that means we don't have to do anything. Paul's worried that the Gentiles are going to end up in the exact same place as the Jews. So I think there are a few things that Paul's making clear by using this metaphor. First, the Jews who have refused to believe in the Messiah will remain cut out of the tree. In verse 23, he stresses that if the Jews turn from their unbelief, That's what he says. If they turn from their unbelief, then they will be grafted back in. In other words, what Paul is saying, what he said all along in Romans, faith in Jesus is non-negotiable. You can't get around having faith in Jesus. That is a non-negotiable for Paul. The second thing that he stresses, the oneness of the family of God. Paul has been making this point all along as well, but the metaphor uses this imagery to drive that point home. That God has done something special and unique in the church by cutting off branches that shouldn't be cut off and bringing others in and saying, this is one family. Paul talks about it in Ephesians in a little bit different way. He doesn't use this metaphor. Over and over and over again in Paul's letters, he stresses the oneness of the family of God. Randy mentioned this a few minutes ago. It's one of the things that drew us to this church when we were looking for where to move. The diversity of this church is awesome. Not just along skin color, but by age, by diversity of our backgrounds, right? From who we are, where we come from. Diversity makes us stronger. Diversity makes us better. And when we stop believing that, when we start believing outside rhetoric that tells us that diversity hurts us, that people who look different and sound different than us hurt us, make us weaker, make us less who we are, I'm here to tell you that's a lie straight from Satan. And if we listen to voices that tell us that, then we're listening to the voice of Satan. That may come across as strong, and I intend it to be strong. Because we cannot allow voices of anti-diversity to hurt the church. We are stronger because of who we are and our diversity in this room. We would be stronger by continuing to bring in more voices of diversity into this room. I hope we believe that. Because that's what Paul's saying here. And he says it again elsewhere in other passages. So if you have a poem about that, come talk to me. And let's look at Scripture together. And hopefully I can convince you that diversity is good for the church. The third thing that Paul is stressing, that he believes very strongly that more Jews will be grafted back in. It's what he says here. He says it would be much easier for God to do the work of grafting back in those who were already cut off, who actually belong to the original tree, than it was to even graft the Gentiles in. And Paul is hoping, and I think Paul envisions that more Jews will come. Now, you can argue about whether that happened, right? Whether what Paul hoped for came about. But I truly believe that's what he's hoping for here. And the fourth thing, again, the Jews need to completely remove from their minds any notion that God has thrown out the Jews altogether. And that the only way forward in Christianity is to be a Gentile. Again, that would be making the same mistake that the Jews did so many years before. That they made it our ethnicity only for this religion. That's what Paul's worried about with the Gentiles. And so we see Paul's final message here in Romans 11, I think, is about mercy upon everyone. In verse 25, Paul uses the Greek word adelphoi, or its root adelphos. It's not an uncommon word for Paul to use. It's not an uncommon word in the New Testament. Some of you probably already know it. We get our city Philadelphia from part of that word. What does Philadelphia mean? The city of brotherly love. The word adelphos in Greek means brother. So Paul uses this plural word, adelphoi, brothers. But it's poignant in this moment that he uses it. For Paul has just summarized that Gentiles really are part of the saving work of God in this world. So he uses this word, brothers, to include them. And to drive the point home that Jews and Gentiles really are part of the same family. He uses this Greek word. Now, it literally means brothers, right? It's a masculine word. It's a Greek masculine and feminine and neuter word. words that didn't have gender. But everybody knows, who reads Greek, that adelphoi would include women as well. So a Greek speaker, if they were to get up and speak or to write a letter, and they use that, and they're writing to a group of mixed people or speaking in front of a group of mixed people, they would use the masculine word. The same as if those of you who learn Spanish, it might be the same in French as well. I'm not sure, I've never learned French. But I know in Spanish, the same is true. That if you're addressing a group of mixed people, of men and women, you use the masculine word. So I think it is completely appropriate to translate brothers and sisters here in Romans. Paul is not writing just to men in Rome, he's writing to men and women, and he's saying brothers and sisters. Now that's a familial term, right? You don't just call anybody brother or sister, do you? My guess is you're not going to go to the grocery store or go to the restaurant after church this morning and walk up to somebody and say, hello, brother so-and-so behind the counter. Hello, sister so-and-so serving my pie. You're probably not going to do that, right? But we do it here, don't we? We call each other brother and sister. Now, that's kind of a lost art form. We used to do it a lot more, right, in the olden times. We used to do it. We call each other brother so-and-so, sister so-and-so. Something special about that. I'm not saying we should necessarily go back to it, but there's something special about that, about recognizing the family that sits in this room. That's what Paul's saying. We are family. When he uses that term, brothers and sisters, he's saying we are family. I really think that's beautiful. What an amazing sentiment from Paul to take home. So God's mercy really is for all. No one is excluded, is what Paul is saying. We do the exclusion. We're the ones who try to keep people out sometimes. We're the ones who segregate our churches and have black churches and white churches and Hispanic churches and whatever other kind of churches. We're the ones who do that. God doesn't do that. God doesn't instill that in us. We do that to ourselves. I really think Paul would be appalled that we do that. I think we should be appalled by that too. And so we have to learn to look at each other as family, and to treat each other as family, and to care for each other as family. Because we are brothers and sisters in this family. So to conclude, just a couple of things. Paul describes God's grace as free and undeserved, right? So do we really believe what Paul says about God's grace? And why is that so difficult to believe at times? Sometimes we want to make up new laws. We want to make up new rules and say, until you get right with God, you don't have His grace. I've read the New Testament, and I fail to see that message. I've read it a bunch of times too. I really believe that God's grace is truly free and undeserved. And just thinking about Christianity in a very broad kind of sense, as Gentile Christians, or as American Christians, or for myself, as a white, male Christian, do you think that we are taking advantage of being grafted? So Paul's speaking against to the Gentiles here. Do not take advantage of the fact that you're part of God's family now. Are we taking advantage of that? Meaning, have we stopped caring about who's in? Right? Is it truly our mission and our desire to see more people brought into it? It's good news for today. That's what Paul presents as the good news in Romans chapter 11. My guess is a lot of you are looking forward to Romans chapter 12 next week. It's a popular chapter. It's a really, really good one. But let's not discount what Paul's saying right before it, because it's going to tie in, I promise. We have an opportunity this morning to extend brotherly and sisterly love to each other by praying for each other, by encouraging each other. Somebody in here is struggling. I'll guarantee you, out of the number of people that are here least, is struggling with something. And you may not want to bring that forward. That's okay. I'm not trying to overpressure you to do that. But if you don't want to bring it forward this morning, let me earnestly beseech you to seek out a friend here, a family member that you can speak to that will encourage you and lift you up. Come find me, come find Danny, come find one of our sisters who will do that. Because that's what we have to do for each other. If you want to come forward, do so as we stand and sing.